Welcome in, everybody, to the Important Nonsense Podcast. 32 teams in 32 days. Today, it is the Baltimore Ravens, so actually some fantasy-relevant players, which is why you are all here right now. I am Steve Bonham, joined as always by Neil Smith and Mike Manning. Neil, how you doing today?
Great. Excited to talk about, not the Falcons. Sorry if you're a Falcons fan.
Mike, how about you?
Yeah,
you feel
I'm
the
more
same?
Excited. Okay.
I
mean, even though it's
I don't
Baltimore,
know. Are you? I was
going to
say, I feel like it is mixed feelings for you because it's not Atlanta, but it also is the Ravens. So
It's true.
This has been a poor back-to-back for me. That it was just unenjoyable the first or last night, and now it's just going to be like, well, I don't like these guys. But I've made a big point throughout my fantasy career to not let bias when it comes to favoritism of teams to do anything in terms of that. For me, doesn't affect my rankings or affect my projections. I'm a realist.
I cannot say the same about Tyreek Hill, but that is that is quite a different story.
Look, there's always going to be case by case examples.
Yeah, sure, right? Yeah, exactly.
Individuals, you just can't generalize it to entire organizations.
Right. As always, I want to remind you guys that we are pre-recording this, so this is currently July 20th for us. So that is the time frame and information we are working off of. And we do everything for 12-team PPR. So if some of our numbers may seem a little off, that may be why. So getting right into it with Baltimore, Lamar Jackson, right off the top. I mean, this is a real debate here, right? I mean, is he a QB1? Do we really want Lamar on our team this year? Is there even any upside? Again, this is the same thing we talked about a couple days ago with Kyler. Really the only discussion is, how do you feel about Lamar in that top tier? Is he in tier 1 or tier 2 for you? That's really the only argument. For me, he's tier 1. I have him projected as the QB1. So where do you guys have Lamar this season?
QB2. My actual ranking.
I'm at QB2 as well. I still have to have Allen ahead of him.
Josh Allen?
Yep. Me too.
And I'm not too worried about the Huntley brothers.
No.
Yeah.
And Lamar is firmly in tier 1, in addition to being the QB2 overall. Firmly in tier 1.
At least he should be. But, I mean, that's the debate. He's QB4 in ADP right now. So, just, again, something to keep. A guy that I have projected to potentially be number 1. I feel like he's got that upside. And of the top tier QBs, probably the one you can get at the biggest discount right now. So, There you go. I don't think we should waste too much time on that. And we'll just move right along because there's really nothing else at QB unless you guys want to discuss anything else about the Ravens offense, if any of this other stuff worries you in any way, shape, or form.
Some folks are talking about what version of this team are you going to see? And I'm like, well, look at their personnel. You've still got injuries at the running backs that we're going to get into here momentarily. So they're saying, is the passing going to regress, and is it going to go? Are they going to go back to more ground and pound? And I'm like, look, whether they might want to do that or might not want to do that, I think is irrelevant. I don't think you're going to have the personnel. And Lamar's passing numbers have been going up every year. That's not just one season. That's a little blip. So I'm not worried about it, and I think he will throw much closer to his 2021 numbers than previous years.
It's also important to remember that when they were the highest rushing and lowest passing volume team in the league, he won the MVP and was the QB1 in fantasy. So
right. So even if they did do that, what are you scared of?
Exactly.
I think you win either way.
Right.
Yeah. The offense in general won't really, the scheme or the style that they plan on, or the ratio they plan on going with, is not going to affect Jackson's value very much at all.
Yeah,
he's going to.
It's more a conversation for the other skill players than it is really for him.
Lamar wins no matter what, and if you roster him, you should win no matter what, barring some crazy injury that we can't predict anyway.
All right, moving on to running back, the guy who's having a huge beef with Rap Sheet right now, J.K. Dobbins. He is really offended that there is some source that thinks there's a chance he starts on the preseason pup. He is outraged.
That clapback was intense.
He's going to show Ian Rappaport. He's got a picture of Ian Rappaport right now on his punching bag in the gym, and he's just working over every day. JK should be the clear-cut number 1. They also signed the ghost of Mike Davis from Atlanta. He went from doing nothing behind Cordarrelle Patterson to doing nothing behind J.K. Dobbins. So moving up in life. Then we've got the Gus Bus. I think to me, that's the biggest question here is how healthy is Gus Edwards going to be coming into the season? Not Dobbins. That's the running back I'm worried about being healthy for week 1 as we come in. Because remember, last offseason, Neil, you and I had that show, 32, and we talked about Dobbins for so long and how Gus Edwards was going to be a reliable number 2. And not even 2 weeks later, they were both out for the season, and none of what we talked about mattered. And
I remember the wrap-up show where we had to spend 30 minutes
we basically just redid the Ravens show for the recap show. So hopefully we're not doing the same thing here. But last year, initially J.K. Dobbins gets hurt, out for the year. Gus Edwards then takes over. He's supposed to be the guy. Is the guy for like half of training camp, then he gets hurt, and it becomes Tyson Williams, and they signed Devonta Freeman.
Yep.
Didn't they sign somebody else too? They signed Le'Veon Bell at one point.
They had Le'Veon Bell for like 2
too.
weeks.
Yeah, Latavius Murray, that was the other one. They signed a bunch of veteran garbage that did nothing for you in any way, shape.
It was Tyson Williams and then like the retirement home.
Yes, exactly. So to me, I think it's Dobbins. He comes back. It's just a matter of when he does come back healthy, where do you evaluate J.K. Dobbins? Because I know I personally am a little bit more skeptical than the general public.
Before we get into that, Mike, that's the one data point I don't have in front of me. Mike, where do you have Dobbins coming in here? Give me like a baseline ranking for what you think.
I think he can be a solid, more mid-number or RB2. Okay. I don't want him to lead my running back core. I would be happy with him as an RB2, but I just don't think that, like we've seen running backs in this offense like Mark Ingram, who shared the workload with a lot of other guys, but still had that huge touchdown upside that just carried him to fantasy like glory.
That one glorious year.
Yeah, it was. I mean, still.
And then we don't talk about what happened after that.
No.
About who was recommending.
That's my quarterback.
Going back to the well on that. We don't talk about any of those things. That's all long. Oh, that's all. Don't bring up ancient history, Mike. Right. But just to go around the horn here, if you're saying RB2, then I think we're all pretty much in more or less alignment. Steve's got him, to put a fine point, Steve's got him at RB29. I've got him at RB24, literally the end of RB2. Steve's actually got him a little bit lower than that, so he's talking about high end, kind of RB3. The ECR has gone straight back to the well at RB22, and that gave me heartburn when I pulled that information in preparing for this. Yeah, you got a lot of eggs in that basket if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, you're RB25 in ADP right now.
That feels about right, ish.
I mean, that feels. I'm sorry, that was a standard RB21. Yikes!
Ooh.
So that's more in line with the ECR, like you're talking about.
Oh,
but
God. No.
Again, my whole trepidation is he played okay behind Mark Ingram in 2020, and then last year when he was supposed to be the guy, got hurt, missed the whole season. We have never seen a situation with this offense where they've given the entire workload to one guy. It's always a committee. There's always somebody who manages the goal line, somebody who's between the 20s, somebody who's the pass catching back. They're rotating a bunch of guys. They brought in Mike Davis. Remember, they were flirting with Melvin Gordon for a majority of the summer. Mm-hmm. Clearly not convinced that they just want to go with J.K. Dobbins. I think there's a non-zero chance they sign another veteran running back at some point here. Once we get into camps, they just get another body in there. I feel like Dobbins is fine and has decent upside. I just don't think physically he can handle the entire workload. I think he's going to have to shake off the rust, at least at the beginning of the season, and it's going to be more of a timeshare than people seem to be projecting.
I think the question really becomes, once we've established that as the baseline, that's going to be not just the website, not just the advice from you, but largely the advice from everyone on this show, is don't get suckered into the J.K. Dobbins ADP and ECR ranking. Let that alone. Yeah. Let someone else deal with that headache. I think once we've set that as the baseline, the question becomes, okay, if you're telling me it's a committee, how do you evaluate the rest of the committee? Is there any kind of nuggets that you guys can give here? So rather than bury the lead here, I'm just going to get right into it. Folks love Gus Edwards still. Steve, you've got him at 70. I think that's largely a reflection of what you talked about a moment ago with the injury concerns. And I think those are well-founded because I have him at RB 60. I'm not convinced he's going to be ready to start the season. I think he opens the season on the pup, and we'll see how many games he actually misses. And then we'll see what he looks like when he gets back, because he's going to miss all the offseason, all the training camp. I don't like that situation for him. The ECR has him at 45. 45. So you're talking about a meaningful flex for your team.
Yeah.
No, thank you. I am all out on that idea. Mike, any comments on anything I just said there related to Gus Edwards?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more geared towards you guys than I am at 45. If you have any inclinations of Gus Edwards starting a game or being a flex-worthy option within the first 4 to 6 weeks, you should not be. Your roster is not in good shape.
Don't even need to see the rest of your team.
No, it's just that's an easy statement right there. You can, like, if you asked us in the Discord or something, like, should we start Gus Edwards this week in week 2? No, but
of course not.
I won't. I'm guessing you're not too high you're not going to end very high in the standings if that's the case. So but the problem is, I believe J.K. Dobbins has had a worse injury than Gus Edwards did. I think there was more than I think Gus Edwards just had the ACL tear, and I think Dobbins had multiple ligaments. Things wrong. So I do believe that Gus Edwards has a slightly better chance at being ready sooner or being on the practice field and, getting work in than Dobbins. This is obviously, as we've saw with Rappaport, we're going to have to see how this goes. It's hard to tell yet because Dobbins hasn't done much yet. But the thing will be, with such a run-heavy offense, then if they both are slowed at the beginning of the season, somebody has to touch the ball in the backfield. Jackson's not going to do everything. So then what? Are they going to do the ghost of Davis? Are they going to have Tyler Batty, the rookie that they drafted, who is mostly more of a receiving guy, at least should be? So it'll become a headache at the beginning of the season, that's for sure. If both of them are
this
kind
is
of like
one of those teams where we're going to get a lot of answers in the preseason because, like we're already talking about here, Dobbins is questionable to be ready for training camp, let alone week 1 of the season. I think he will get there and be ready for week 1, but he will not play a single snap of the preseason.
No,
Same thing with
they're not
Gus
going to walk
Edwards.
into that buzzsaw again.
There's no point.
Yeah.
So
Why?
both Dobbins and Edwards are going to miss the preseason. That means Mike Davis is your lead back for those 3 games. That means Tyler Batty is going to get a lot of time out there. That means Justice Hill is going to get a lot of time out there. And we're going to see a pecking order between them come through real quick. And we'll see who's good at what, who they trust, who they're running with the first and second team, and who's the guy going in the 4th quarter of the 3rd game that's clearly going to get cut. Justice Hill.
Sure. There you go. Justice Hill. It's why, if you'll notice, if you're actually looking at this visually, Justice Hill isn't even on the depth chart that we maintain.
Right. Well, neither is Tyler Batty, but that's because it only goes to the 3rd string. So.
Right. So the one thing that I will say is, just to round it out, of the guys that we actually have ranked, Steve, you had Mike Davis 60. I think that tells you everything you need to know. You got him 10 spots ahead of Edwards. It's large. Yeah. It's not. I don't think that's a comment on talent. I don't want to speak for you, but I think that's a comment on injury and availability. And I have Mike Davis 70 because I just don't think Mike Davis is very good. And the ECR has him at 73. So that being said, that's a season-long ranking. That is not a first 3 to 4 games of the season ranking. Check back. We'll have those rankings for you when we get closer to it. But I'd say if you're looking at a Mike Davis type of thing, it's kind of one of those deals that I think you could get him right near the end of your draft if you really wanted to, right before your defense and kicker. Stash him on the end of your bench if you're thin at running back and you need a body for 3-4 weeks while you ferret around trying to figure out how to blow all your fab on whatever the hot, waiver claim is. And nobody on this show or on the ECR has Batty above RB90. Yeah. So that's just not even really a thing.
I think that if you're looking at Dobbins or Edwards, the big thing is at their ADP, where I'm not loving it, if you can get the value of them slipping slightly past that, then you're starting to think, all right, this can be, it's not going to be a bad thing if I take them at a slight discount. Mm-hmm. I'm willing to jump in.
What I would say is, to Steve's point about we're going to get answers, one of the things that could be interesting here to keep an eye on is the ADP of both Dobbins and Edwards, to your point, Mike. As we get, this is why we always tell people every year, it's our usual PSA, draft as late as humanly possible. If you can draft on Labor Day weekend and you can get your league to do it, do it. Because by then, I want to monitor the slide that I'm expecting as people, especially if Dobbins plays no training camp, no preseason. Do we think he's still going to be RB22 in the ECR? Because my gut tells me no. And at that point, it's how far does the slide actually go, and then what does the public think? And it depends what league you're playing in. Are you playing with, regular people, or are you playing with experts? How's all that going to go? But Dobbins is one of the ones that, as we sit here on 720, his ECR rating is 22. I'm sure his ADP is pretty much in line with that. As we get a month later, let's see if that maintains that way.
I will throw this out there just to put a bow on the running backs. And I don't think anybody else has anything on running back, right?
No, I'm good.
So Gus Edwards was one of the biggest question marks and mysteries last season, and we never got to see how it ended up panning out. But we're right back in this situation where everybody is saying, oh, he's the clear-cut number 2. He's the sure backup. He's the guy that I want. And it seems to be that he's being given that simply for the fact that he was just going to be the guy when Dobbins was out. Because when you go back and look at it, he was the clear-cut backup in 2019 to Mark Ingram, and he finished at RB 56. And then in 2020, they draft J.K. Dobbins as the heir apparent to Mark Ingram, and he was the third running back in that group and finished at RB 38 because he scored 6 touchdowns. He was the goal line back who stole all the work. So then Ingram left. He was supposed to move up on the depth chart, and we never got to see him with an expanded or larger role. I'm not even 100% convinced he's a top 40 fantasy running back, even if he is the clear-cut number 2 behind J.K. Dobbins. So to have him at 45 in the ECR and 56 right now in ADP, when we've never seen him do anything other than vulture touchdowns at the goal line, I mean,
it's very fair.
It's not something I'm willing to invest in.
We talked about that this time last year,
yes,
about what has Gus Edwards actually done.
Right.
And we're having this conversation again. We should roll the wide receiver. And I'm going to go first because I'm let Steve get a drink of water and stretch his vocal cords and get all like, he might need to actually go get a helmet or something. So I'm going to go first, and then we'll go to Mike, and then we're going to lay out Mike and give Steve the runway for what's about to happen here. So
the fireworks show. Yeah,
not to bury the lead, but the title of the segment is Bateman's season is upon us, and there he has to go off camera to get his resistance bands to get loose. You got to do vocal exercises. It's me, like sibilance, like yeah. But so Rashod Bateman, it is in all likelihood Bateman's season, especially with a couple days ago we talked about Hollywood Brown no longer being with the team, and I mean we'll go through the rest of their receiving core here, but it's pretty much Bateman and the Pips, and that's an insult to the Pips. Like that's kind of what that is. But for the record, I have Rashod Bateman, wide receiver 25, just outside of basically he's a wide receiver 2. Nice upgrade from last year. I've got him ahead of the ECR. The ECR has him at 29. Like, I'm expecting big things. I think that's a very fair rating based on performance from last year, and I just want to lay that out. nice, sensible ranking from me. It's a little conservative, but it's still ahead of the ECR. And I think that that's a very fair rating for him, given what he was able to accomplish last season. Mike, do you have any comments on Rashod Bateman?
I mean, if you can, even based on those ADPs and ECR, if you can get Bateman as your wide receiver 3, I think you should be ecstatic.
I think you should be doing a cartwheel.
Yeah. So because of what we saw last year, he was a good wide receiver. We saw that he was talented in college. And this Baltimore offense, as we've seen the past few years, Hollywood Brown had over 100 targets year after year.
Right.
So that was while fighting with a player like last year, occasionally with a player like Bateman, who was a talented wide receiver, another first rounder. So I don't see an issue with Bateman being the number one of a Baltimore Ravens offense. I know that's why Hollywood Brown wanted out, was because he didn't like it.
Yeah.
But Bateman is a good player to draft this year. Talent-wise, situation-wise, I'll be happy.
Seems like you and I are very much in alignment, Mike, and now I'm going to go ahead and just get under the desk. And we'll just go to Steve. All right, go ahead, Steve.
So, like you talked about last year, you really almost can do an apples to apples, because remember I believe it was the first 6 weeks of the season, Bateman missed with injury to start his career. So for that time, it was just Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews as the only pass catchers, really. And during those weeks that he was out and it was just Brown, Marquise Brown was a top 6 PPR wide receiver during those weeks because he was just force-fed the ball. Then Rashod Bateman comes back healthy. You've got the 2 wide receivers and Andrews, and then Lamar goes down hurt. And then Huntley's only throwing to Mark Andrews and basically no one else. So yes, Bateman did not have the rookie season that I clearly hoped he would have. But yes, I have him projected as a top 10 wide receiver in PPR, because how could you not? He has the target share and volume. Who else is going to take it away from him? When this trade happened on draft night, I said, okay, well, yeah, of course he's going to be a top 10 projected wide receiver until they fill that void. Someone will fill the void. They can't possibly go into the season without drafting or signing anyone, right? Right? And here we are. Here we are 3 months after the draft. They still haven't signed anybody. They didn't draft any wide receivers. So we've just got these guys fighting it out for possessions and targets from Rashod Bateman. And I don't think any of them are good enough to hold his towel, let alone take targets away from him. So yes, for me, Rashod Bateman, easy slam dunk. Even in a low passing volume offense, should have more than enough target share with Lamar Jackson to end up as a top 15 pick for sure. And even then, this is the same thing I will say last year. Last year, I had him, I believe, as like wide receiver 25, 26, something like that. And it was, oh, that's crazy. He's going like wide receiver 60. Why would I pay that? You wouldn't. You would look at the ADP and know I have him ranked there and say, okay, well, I can take him at 40 and it's still a steal. And it's the same thing here this season. Once again, even as the wide receiver 1 on the team with no competition, he's going at wide receiver 38 in the 8th round. So you can have Rashod Bateman for virtually free from a wide receiver standpoint. Like you're saying, Mike, is basically your 3rd or 4th wideout off the board. Mm-hmm. I mean, what a steal. That's how you win leagues right there.
Yeah, I didn't check the ADPs. I just pulled our rankings. So the ADP, the public is clearly not interested in this or hasn't just caught up to it yet. Mm-hmm. So, because even at Mike and I's estimates, where basically we're saying,
see, this is the reverse DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, it's true. It would.
We don't know that name yet, so let it fade down the board.
My one thing. You said who's going to take it from him? Well, we'll get there in a little bit, but it would be Mark Andrews if anybody had.
I mean, you say a little bit, but is there anything else to talk about at wide receiver? Because I don't think so.
No, we could run through it. I mean, Mike, you would pose the question: who emerges as the wide receiver 2? And you'd listed Devin Duvernay and James Proche or Julio Jones, and I like the third one because I literally wrote it's Duvernay if they don't sign anybody.
Yeah.
And if they do sign somebody, it's anybody you sign. I don't care if it's Julio Jones. I don't care who it is. It's anybody, because you can see it on the screen in front of you. I would put it to anybody who's a casual fan who doesn't really get into this to tell me anything about anyone on that list that isn't Rashod Bateman. Yeah. Tell me anything. One fact. Like, give me anything. No one even knows who any of these individuals are. And there's a reason for that. It's because you had mentioned that they're not good enough to hold Rashod Bateman's towel. That's disrespectful to Rashod Bateman's towel.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they shouldn't even be in the same practice facility. I think Rashod Bateman should be somewhere else. Like, that's,
if I had to bet on it today, I would say Julio Jones signs in Green Bay during the preseason, and I say around week 4 or 5, Odell Beckham signs with Baltimore to stick it to the Browns twice a season. I think that's what he would like to do. That seems like the most logical Odell move to make.
Sure,
just me.
My point is,
even then, that's your clear-cut wide receiver too.
Sure, my point is, even if the ghost of T.Y. Hilton signs in week 6,
right?
I'll take that. Like, 33-year-old T.Y. Hilton on one leg, I'll take over any of the other guys that are already on their roster. Oh boy, remember Willie Snead?
Yep.
Not a thing, Willie Snead, for years and years and years. I would take Willie Snead over about half of this. That's how little I think of it. Maybe I would take Tylan Wallace over Willie Snead. But beyond that, that's totally different. That's not even apples to apples. Tylan Wallace is a burner. Willie Snead can't run to save his life. But my point is, there's nothing there. That's the one reason why when I saw I underlined wide receiver 10, and I'm like, yeah, Steve's going to go back to the well on this. And I can't really argue with you too much. I mean, because we have this conversation every year.
And the ADP is 38.
Yeah.
So if you take him at 30, I'm not going to be insulted. I will say congratulations for getting an unbelievable Steve.
That's why I didn't say anything to you about it, because we do this show. We do these shows every year, and I know how your rankings work, where it's like, just because you have a guy rated at 10 does not necessarily mean that you're going out and telling people you have to spend it at 10. No. You can wait. You got. That's why having the ADPs is the other critical piece of information.
Yep. All right, tight end. Mark Andrews and everybody else.
He's pretty good.
I mean, Nick Boyle's still there. They drafted Isaiah Likely. They also drafted Charlie Kolar. I personally liked Isaiah Likely in his highlight reel and what he was able to do in college. But again, it's rookie tight end. Doesn't matter.
I'll talk to you about Isaiah Likely 3 years after Mark Andrews is gone.
Yeah, it doesn't matter in fantasy. It very rarely even matters from an NFL perspective. But he will be a body, and he's probably the most likely to be the pass catcher of the group that is there behind Mark Andrews. But it is Mark Andrews, and that's the big debate. So Mark Andrews was supposed to be the next guy 2 years ago. He was supposed to take over the number 1 tight end spot 2 years ago, was a massive disappointment. And I say massive disappointment, he was like tight end 5, but the tight end, that's a massive disappointment.
In tight end,
And then last year he was going around tight end 5 or 6 in ADP and ends up as the tight end 1, passing Travis Kelce, finally ripping the torch away from him. So now we come back, and as we have talked about a couple of times here, a majority of that work that he put in last year was from Huntley, only looking at him and targeting him specifically in the end zone the back half of the season. So with Lamar Jackson coming back healthy, does that affect Mark Andrews?
Well, it would have to, but the question becomes it's a magnitude issue. Yeah. Does it affect him enough
to knock him down?
And I say no. I don't think it actually does. I think at this point it's Bateman and it's Mark Andrews as far as pass catchers for the Ravens. Nothing else matters. Yeah. And for the record, I've got Mark Andrews as we sit here on 720 tight end 1. You do as well, Steve, unless that's changed since I pulled this, but I don't think it has. Okay. Yeah. And I don't think there's too much to say about it. He's good. He's in a good situation. As weird as that is to kind of say, given the low passing volume, but he's in a good. It's not going to look the same way Kelce gets it done for you. But Mark Andrews, when it's all said and done, those red zone targets I think are still going to be there. And as much as you love Bateman is not going to get 100% of everything.
Right.
So I'm not overly worried about the fact that a lot of that was with Huntley, especially with the exodus of anything else that could realistically matter. I'm going back to the well. I'm good with it.
I think that if you were looking at it, before the NFL draft, and we were having this conversation, and Marquise Brown was still on the Ravens, that's when you look at Huntley versus Jackson and being like, all right, well, there's three guys to feed now. Does Bateman take over as the number 2, or does he hurt Brown more? Does he hurt Andrews more?
Yeah.
We don't have to have that conversation anymore because Brown's gone. So yeah, Andrews is going to be fine. I don't have him tight end 1. I still have Kelsey as tight end 1, but I
can't
still
really argue with you too hard about that though.
Yeah.
My biggest swing between the two of them, and again, you're nitpicking. Travis Kelce's 32 this season.
Yeah.
Tyreek Hill's gone. We'll talk about that when we get to Kansas City, but he can't do it forever. Nobody can beat Father Time. Undefeated.
Right. Jason Witten tried. Okay.
Well,
if we're talking about like and kind, old Stumpy made one of the most valiant tight end efforts I've ever seen.
Tom Brady's cryogenics are trying, but we'll see about that.
You got one or two more years on that too, and then that's done.
Either that,
but Travis Kelce's 32. Mark Andrews is 26.
That's the swing.
I mean, he's in his physical prime. He's not even in his physical prime. It's 27 to 29 is the tight end.
He's turning into his football prime. Yeah, he's going into his football prime.
And the last 3 years, he's finished tight end 3, tight end 6, like I said, which was the massive disappointment, and then tight end 1. So you're talking about a floor of tight end 6, and he's 26 on a low passing volume offense that really he's one of 2 guys you can throw the ball to. So
yeah. And Andrews' place he lines up the most is the slot, which is also where Jackson likes to throw the ball.
Yeah.
That's why he's done well with Jackson up to this point. Just Huntley is kind of clouding some people's mentality, being like, well, Huntley was the one that ended the season with him that massively targeted him. Yeah, he went from like 5th in targets to 1st in targets.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't massively different. The big thing was that to end the season, he was tied with Cooper Kupp. Like it wasn't even among tight ends. It was among everybody.
Yeah.
So that's the only real difference there. He's going to get his. There's no doubt.
Steve, you want to whip through defense and kicker real quick? This is mostly
obligatory. Justin Tucker's the number 1 for me every year. So, I mean, if you wanted to go crazy and take a 15th round kicker instead of a 16th round kicker, Justin Tucker would be the guy I would do it on. Otherwise, again, wait on kicker as always. And then the Ravens, I've got them ranked at 11. They're ADP 11 right now. So there you go. If they're there in the 15th round, all yours.
Don't do the thing where people see Ravens and then they start reaching on defenses.
Yeah.
Don't do that. That's a classic casual player move.
That's not even the thing right now. Is like when you're talking about ADP 11. Again, we're talking about a 12-team league. So that means 10 people have already drafted their defense. You're the 11th person now grabbing yours.
Perfect.
And it's the Ravens.
That is perfect. That's great. Excellent. Do that.
Especially that oddball that has 2 defenses,
Don't be that guy.
Like, this show isn't for those folks. We've weeded them out meticulously. They're not allowed to see this.
That's not the nonsense we're talking about.
There's a paywall for them.
All right, but that's it. That is the Ravens. Tomorrow we will have Buffalo. So back-to-back fantasy relevant teams. Very interesting indeed. Anything to wrap up Baltimore today, gentlemen, or no?
Mike, I appreciate you tamping down the bile to get through that. I appreciate it.
I don't have the terrible towels behind me.
No.
I kept it civil.
We'll hang them back up for Buffalo.
Well, I know you have the sick bucket, and we edited around it, the retching, but you did a nice job of keeping it off camera. It was good.
All right.
Just
get ready for sometime like a week or a week and a half from now when it's the hour-and-a-half breakdown of the Steelers. Then you all will be in for a treat. Like, that'll be great.
All the terrible towels will mysteriously be back in the background at that point.
It'll just be a full backdrop of it. Like, that'll be.
Do you have a suit of terrible towels that you've had commissioned to stitch together? I'm guessing that's in the closet somewhere.
No, but that sounds like a wonderful Christmas present.
He's writing that down. Right
Folks, we
now.
need help. We need your help at patreon.com. The more money we can get, the more likelihood we can get Mike on camera in a suit made of discarded terrible towels.
100%.
Make it happen, folks.
We need it.
I would wear that with pride on every podcast that we want.
That would be fantastic. All right. Well, while we look forward to that, we will talk to you all tomorrow about the Bills. And until then, just keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!